The Outer Rim has always been portrayed as the deadly and lawless outer reaches of the galaxy, with few safe harbours and the galaxy's criminals ready to prey on the helpless. Now, this is particularly true in The Mandalorian, when we see many locations have more or less fallen into total anarchy. But why exactly is this, and how did the fall of the Empire contribute so highly to the Outer Rim's degeneration? Now, we have talked before about why exactly the Outer Rim is so dangerous. It is widely spaced out, meaning that policing this territory is incredibly difficult. For example, if a pirate attacks your vessel in the middle of the Outer Rim, the closest help could be hours or even days away, giving criminals enough time to commit their nefarious acts and get away without any form of repercussions. Now, this isn't just the age of the Empire when this is a problem. This has sort of been an issue for the Star Wars galaxy forever. Even the Republic and Separatist Alliance had this problem. You see, policing the entirety of the Outer Rim is basically impossible. Generally, it's maintained somewhat as a frontier system, where the forces in the Outer Rim, such as the Hutts, independent businesses, and other syndicates and worlds, all sort of keep the powers in check. Sure, they don't keep the Outer Rim crime-free by any means, and a lot of them actually contribute to the crime. But it does keep the Outer Rim relatively stable. If any force becomes too powerful, or crimes are committed that are too egregious for the galaxy's major powers, such as the Republic, to ignore, then they will inevitably intervene. For example, during the Age of the Republic, the Jedi will have been dispatched to bring the perpetrators to justice before leaving. And this is by no means a perfect system, but it does somewhat work. It stops any one faction in the Outer Rim becoming too much of a threat, at least a threat to the mid and core. Now, things get really interesting in the Outer Rim by the time of the Clone Wars, and this is when a lot of things start to change. You see, nothing gets resources flowing like a war, and as the Outer Rim and the resources it controls all of a sudden became more and more relevant to both sides, there was basically an influx of resources. Troops, both Republic and Separatists, were being stationed on worlds that previously had no form of law and order. We also need to remember that much of the Separatists' territory during the war was in the Outer Rim. For this reason, there was naval patrols going around all over the place defending their borders. And there was a lot more safe harbours for people who were just trying to live their lives, at least in theory. So, at the end of the day, during the Clone Wars, crime was pretty hard to commit and get away with. Of course, this did come with numerous downsides. But then we can fast forward to when the Empire takes over. So initially, the criminals will have enjoyed some respite as the Imperials worked to secure the valuable territory in the core and mid-rim. However, the Empire is an autocracy with a goal of total control, and for this reason, this involves taming the Outer Rim for good. It's quite famous that Wilhuff Tarkin was the one who was tasked with doing this. So all of a sudden, Star Destroyers loomed overhead, and the Imperials were spending a pretty big portion of their massive military budget across the Outer Rim, bringing it to heel. And peace, as brutal and unforgiving as it was at the hands of this terror state, came to the Outer Rim. Realistically, it will have been far safer to have lived in the Outer Rim under the Empire than in any other time period, because unlike the Republic before it, it wasn't just dipping in and out of the Outer Rim to solve major problems. The Empire dedicated permanent resources to that entire sector. Now, the motivation for the Empire doing this was by no means to keep the people of the Outer Rim safe. It was done for all manner of nefarious reasons, possibly most importantly, to gather resources that they needed. If you wanted to commit a crime in the Outer Rim, you would have to be very, very careful not to run into one of the many, many Imperial outposts and patrols that were around. But this doesn't explain why the Outer Rim again seems to fall apart, so we're going to fast forward to the Galactic Civil War, particularly after Palpatine's death. And the Outer Rim is not really a priority at this point. You see, majority of the Empire's forces will have been pulled out and restationed towards the core and mid-rim to secure their more valuable assets, particularly worlds like Coruscant. So what happens to the Outer Rim? Well, it's more or less abandoned. Without the manpower and resources coming in from the Empire, it didn't take long for the criminals to begin to move in and seize power. And this was made even worse, because when the Imperials withdrew from the Outer Rim, it was undoubtedly very messy and pretty rushed. This means that a lot of assets will have been left behind. Blasters, vehicles, for example the AT-STs that we see in the Mandalorian. Now, all of these resources that were hastily abandoned basically turned the Outer Rim into a bit of a powder keg. And there wasn't really any force out there that could keep them in check. The New Republic and Empire were too busy fighting. Remember, the Rebellion/New Republic was pushing into the mid-rim to head towards the core, meanwhile the Empire was bitterly trying to defend all of its territories and carry out a set of ludicrous contingency orders, all whilst vicious power plays were taking place. The Imperials were a complete and utter mess at this point. But the main factor here is neither of the two sides were really that bothered about what was happening in the Outer Rim. So basically, it went from the securest it had ever been under the Empire to the most lawless it had ever been, propped up by all of these resources and weapons that the Empire left behind overnight. Remember, there was no Jedi to act as peacekeepers, no large-scale war to patrol the territory, and no Empire to enforce a tyrannical rule. Just open opportunities for those willing to take them. And this is where we find ourselves in The Mandalorian. The New Republic hasn't quite got around to rebuilding itself to the point where it wants to go anywhere near the Outer Rim in terms of permanently dedicating resources, time, and occupying it. The New Republic seems to use a system very similar to the Old Republic used to, promoting marshals of the New Republic on certain worlds and kind of reinforcing that frontier justice. The problem with this is that it doesn't actually bring law and order to the Outer Rim in any large scale. It just means that potentially, if a criminal does commit an act on a certain world, then they may be brought to justice. However, the actual validity of that justice is pretty debatable. Firstly, they're entrusting individuals, and you can guarantee that a lot of those individuals will have probably just taken bribes from the criminals. As well as this, we're also assuming the fact that the people who were made marshals of the Outer Rim weren't just going to go ahead and try to seize power for themselves, with the backing of the New Republic. Ultimately, I think this really explains why the Outer Rim is a bit of a mess by the time we see it in The Mandalorian. The problem with it is that policing it and actually maintaining order there is so difficult, and it demands so many resources that you kind of need to be a military centralized autocracy to even be able to do it. That, or you could try to bring the bickering Outer Rim worlds into some form of an alliance, which in some ways is kind of what the Separatists did. However, we all saw how that ended. But what do you guys think? Why is the Outer Rim so lawless? And when do you think the safest time period was to live in these territories? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, I really do hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please remember to like, share and sub, as it is really appreciated and it helps the channel grow. Also, don't forget to follow me on Twitter at TheLawGuy and tick the bell to get regular updates. But most importantly, thank you so much for watching this video today. I hope you're all having a great day and you're all staying safe, and I'll see you next time.